What was your evil genius moment? Story 1. Not me, but a friend back in first grade did this. It was art time, so everyone was making shapes out of clay. His creations kept getting smashed by the class bully. This stopped after he embedded a needle inside his clay volcano. It went through the bully's hand. Friend got in trouble, but he said it was worth it. I have one very similar to this. Me and a friend would try to build a hollow pyramid every day from Legos before this one kid came in and smashed it. One day we made the pyramid, probably 30 by 30 at the bottom, completely full, without missing a single empty space in the middle. When he came in and made a fist and tried to smash it, he nearly broke his hand. I like it. Unlike putting a needle inside the volcano, there's no way you could get in trouble for this. Genius. Resorting to violence is pretty evil, and the needle was certainly creative. The bully may have had it coming, but I'm glad your friend got in trouble. You probably don't want to encourage this kind of retaliation. Story 2. I worked for a large multinational company that makes bleach. The entire IT department, 150 plus people, were told their jobs had been outsourced to Costa Rica via HP. Oh, and we had to train our replacements. Joy. The particular IT function I was in took me a year to learn, and I'm not stupid. There were 7 of us in the department. They gave us 2 weeks to train our replacements. Yeah, you see where this is going? The majority of the time our replacements were there, they were glued to YouTube. We explained many times to those who should care that these people were not getting it and didn't care they weren't getting it. It was generally taken that we were just trying to keep our jobs. Fast forward to 6 weeks after we had been let go, each of us gets a semi-panicked, pleaful call from someone at the bleach company basically saying, "Help!" In the 6 weeks since we left, HP had let the requests back up to over 6 times what we normally had in queue. 6 times the amount. Well, we all got together for lunch and discussed. I had gotten a new job by this point and wanted to stay there. I recommended they each call HP back and say, "Sure, I'll help for $100 an hour." Wonderfully, they all did. End of the story, 3 people were brought back as contractors for 3 years, making 3 to 4 times what they were being paid as employees. Mission accomplished. The same thing happened to one of the jobs I had. We were expected to train our replacements in Mexico. Needless to say, they didn't get very good training. And then after things started to transition, we watched them do a slow motive dive bomb into disaster. We chuckled with satisfaction. Yep, as mentioned, I had another job about a month afterwards and used to see some former coworkers on BART. It was from them that I heard the horror stories of how IT was being run and handled. I felt bad for the workers being affected, but felt great inside knowing how much we were really missed. Suggesting your coworkers use the company's desperation as leverage into an excellent salary was genius, but seeing as the company definitely did something dumb and shady, I have a hard time calling this evil. I think justice was rightly served. Story 3. Oh, mine's evil. My kids were behaving terribly just before Christmas, and before I had time to think, I said, "If you don't behave, I'll throw away a Christmas present." The threat worked, but not for long because they called my bluff. So one night, as I was scrubbing the marker off my walls, I wrapped an empty box in Christmas paper and put it under the tree. The next day, they did something naughty and I threw it away. Not only were they good that December, but every Christmas season since. Amazing parent for not actually throwing a present away, but still making a strong and terrifying point. This really is genius, and I will be saving this trick to use on my own kids one day. Hopefully, I'll never need to though. Story 4. When I was 13, in what would probably be called middle school in America, I was being bullied by a thuggish jerk. Once, I stayed after school for an hour to do a test that I missed, and when I came back to the classroom, I saw that the bully's locker was wide open, and his phone was in it. I thought about taking it and destroying the phone, but I decided that instead, I would set a passcode for it. The next morning, I saw him repeatedly try to use his phone and repeatedly be told that his password was incorrect. Eventually, he threw it against the wall and broke it out of frustration. He deserved it. This is amazing. You made him smash his own phone. If someone was to be blamed by a teacher, it would be him. Story 5. When I was in high school during my second hour physics class, I routinely had a bottle of Sprite with me. Every day, the kid behind me would wait for me to get up and then would grab it and chug half of it as fast as he could. So one day, I took it home and filled it back up with white vinegar and brought it with me the next day. As usual, I wandered off, and when I knew he was looking, he grabbed it, started chugging, and immediately ran to the sink and threw up. I laughed my butt off while he had to try to explain himself to the teacher, and my Sprite went unmolested for the rest of the semester. I was half hoping you filled it with bleach. I didn't just say that. He was sort of a friend of mine. Didn't want to be too evil. Bleach would have been too evil. You can't go too evil or you're just a full-blown villain. Story 6. In college, I was sharing a dorm room with two of my best friends from high school. I love my friends like brothers, but we could be jerks to one another pretty badly. Chris unfortunately crossed a line and unleashed my fury when he popped the lock on our bathroom and snapped a Polaroid picture of me when I was on the John one night. He then tossed said photo out of the window of our 13th floor dorm room for anybody to find. In the days that followed, I learned to pop the lock on our shower door. It was basically a closet-sized room with only a shower. I also set about getting several pictures of water to nearly freezing temperatures, just cold enough that ice started to form on the surface. I bided my time. Eventually, Chris went to take one of his weekly spa showers where he said he cranked the hot water to full and basically just sat under it for about an hour. I waited a bit for him to hit the hottest water temperature, then I rallied the rest of my dorm mates, handed out pitchers of ice water, then quietly popped the lock and opened the door to the shower. In hindsight, we probably could have killed him by dumping ice water on him when he was as hot as he was, but at the time, hearing him scream like a little girl and fall down in the shower was well worth it. I'm pretty sure you couldn't kill him like that, except if you tried. You've never jumped from a sauna into a snowbank? Nah, apparently it's something I've been misled about my entire life. I've always heard that dumping ice water on someone who's gotten really hot can cause them to go into shock. FML for never questioning that fact. Story 7. Okay, here we go. It was the year 1992. I was in 2nd grade and my friends and I would always build the sweetest of sandcastles in the sandbox at recess. As our recess would end, the 4th graders would be released from their lunch and come storming in. Each and every day, one of them would come flying into the sandbox with one purpose: to kick down our beautiful feat of sand engineering. This happened for weeks. Finally, I became fed up. My army of 2nd graders and I found a pile of cinder blocks by the woods near our playground. We piled the blocks too high and covered them with sand. Then we took some time to make the structure appear like any one of our standard sandcastles. The 4th graders were let out. One comes zooming on down, winds up for a huge kick, and breaks his foot. I have, to this day, felt not one semblance of guilt. Punk got his. Please tell me you didn't get in trouble. I think that is what makes this revenge evil genius. How could we have gotten in trouble? We were just using the cinder blocks for extra support. Wink wink. That's true. I agree. And also, that kid would have to explain why he was going in and kicking sandcastles in the first place. He was the one being a bully. Story 8. I ran track in middle school and I routinely brought a huge bottle of Gatorade to practice. Someone kept on stealing and drinking my Gatorade. I had an idea of who it was, but I never said anything. My mom told me to rub hot peppers on the rim of the bottle, so I did that. After that, no one stole my Gatorades ever again. Your mom is a fiendish woman. Apparently, she was involved in a lot of shenanigans when she was younger. She told me about a teacher she had who was horrible to the students. This was in Vietnam about 40 years ago, so beatings for students were allowed. She told me that she let all of the air out of his tires one day when he wouldn't stop terrorizing her friends. Your mom sounds awesome. It must have been fun being raised by an evil genius, except for when the antics were directed at you, I'm sure. Story 9. I lived in a very large house, a former frat house mansion that was being used as a boarding house. It had a communal kitchen, bathrooms, and entertainment rooms that all 20+ people shared. We were sure which person was eating everyone else's food, but we couldn't prove it. After work on Friday, one of the other guys and I made brownies with chocolate X-Lax. We put them in the refrigerator with a note to not eat them. We took off for the weekend for a hike. We came back on Sunday night to find 1/3 eaten and no toilet paper in the entire house. Everyone thought it was hilarious, except the one guy we all suspected of stealing food. The suspected food thief left a passive-aggressive note saying he was also sick of people stealing food, so he upped the ante by leaving rat poison in his food. So he put rat poison in his own food? He said that he did. Of course, nobody was stealing his food. This was how he attempted to look indignant that there was some other food thief. Story 10. My parents are friends with this couple whose son is a punk. But when they'd come over, we were expected to play nicely together. Luckily for me, this wasn't too often because he was a horrible bully, made worse by the fact that I'm 3 years younger and a girl. I remember once when I was 6 or so, we were playing in the garden when he grabbed me by the ankles and held me upside down over the garden waste pile behind our fence, telling me there were spiders in my hair. Now I have never been one for screaming and crying, but that was pretty horrible. Anyway, he was always a jerk to me and everyone, but I never told on him, partly because I was scared, and partly because I was a generally chilled out kid and didn't want to be the victim. Show no weakness. One evening, he and his parents were over and we were getting on well enough for once, playing Pokemon Red upstairs in my room on our respective Game Boys. Not content with being equals for an hour, he starts boasting about how great his team is compared to mine, how he has way more Pokemon than me, how he's beaten the Elite Four hundreds of times, and get this, he has a Mew. He spins this huge tale about how he got it from his friend who went to Japan, specifically to visit an old man who was the only person in the world who could get you a Mew officially. While I doubted the veracity of his tale, he did indeed have a Mew. He tells me he got it when his friend did a very difficult trading cheat so they could duplicate the Mew. I'm not sure how, but I eventually managed to convince him to do the cheat with me. We go over the rules, the trade begins, and when it's nearly complete, he switches his Game Boy off, and I wait for the trade to complete. But then it happens. A flash of genius. I switch mine off, and then when we restart, I have his Mew and he has a Caterpie, or some level 5 crap. He looks at his Game Boy, he looks at me, I thought he might hit me. Suddenly, the gravity of the situation hits him and he launches himself out of my room screaming and crying and rolling around in the hall. Our parents rushed upstairs to see what was going on. "She did it wrong," he cries. "She took my Mew." Naturally, none of the grown-ups understand Pokemon, so when they look at me, lip quivering, tears in my eyes, the conclusion is obvious. "Oh, stop crying," they say. "She's just a wee girl. I'm sure she didn't mean it." Still crying and screaming, the little crap yells at them to make me do the trade again. But of course, there's no sense in risking both of our Pokemans or whatever it is. He got into trouble for causing a scene and for shouting at me. I got comforted by everyone, a Mew, and the sweet, sweet taste of victory. I am pretty dang bothered that you got away just by being a girl, but the actual plan and execution was marvelous. Also, my reputation for not throwing tantrums or being a little crap, but you know. Story 11. I was sick of my roommate abusing my Xbox 360. He would play it for hours on end, and occasionally leave it on throughout the night. Then he would get mad at me for shutting it off when I got up in the morning because he hadn't saved his game. I tried reasoning with him and said to take it easy on such a delicate console, a first edition Xbox 360. Well, anyway, he is not very tech savvy at all, and I like to think I am, so I went into the router settings and blocked all the ports that the Xbox needs to access the internet. When it happened, he became extremely frustrated and couldn't figure out why the Xbox wasn't working. He couldn't figure it out, and none of his friends could either. I told him that he broke the Xbox from playing it too much. I still continue to rub it in that he broke the Xbox. Did he repay you in any way? No, but his bike got stolen because his lock broke. He wanted repayment for it because I was the last one on the bike, even though he rode it just as much. He wanted like $60 for it, but after I pulled the "you broke the Xbox" scam, he shut up real quick about the bike. Story 12. I was 7 and had a neighbor I couldn't stand. He was the annoying child friend meme to a T. He would come over and tell me how much money his dad made, how my parents' cars sucked, my house was not as nice, etc. By default, the kid was always invited to mine and my brother's birthday parties. One party, we were playing Pin the Tail on the Donkey. He was the blindfolded one. My mom had spun him to the point of dizziness and sent him on his way. Shortly thereafter, my dad called my mom into the kitchen and I knew what to do. I opened the basement door, nudged him in that direction, and just waited while everyone else watched in horror. The kid had just reached the doorway when my mom walked in, screamed, and closed the door before he could fall through. In retrospect, I could have killed him, so I'm glad my plan did not come entirely to fruition. That is some serious evil genius beginnings right there. Yes, a little too evil. Let's hope OP outgrew resorting to potential murder as revenge for someone annoying him. Story 13. So I began to suspect my wife was cheating on me with her coworker. I confronted both and was told I was being a jealous husband. They were just best friends and I needed to understand that. So I befriended him, became his workout partner, and learned everything I could about him. I invited him to my dinner table even though I knew he was stooping my wife. Physical violence was often considered, but neither him nor her were worth me spending a life sentence in prison, so I played dumb. He was a bodybuilder and took steroids. He wasn't incredibly bright, and had just barely gotten through college. He was working minimally paying jobs while he worked on his true desire. He was applying for the firefighter school in our major metro city. If accepted, it would would be a lifetime job for him and a career he had dreamed about since childhood. He talked often during our workout sessions about how much it meant to him. Without revealing too much about myself, I have countless EMS and fire department contacts through my career in healthcare. He also knew I was knowledgeable about medicine and drugs. When he started to ask questions about steroids, I made sure to give him just enough info to have him wanting to ask me more. I then made sure he started emailing me his steroid questions. Ironically, he used an account that even had his full name in the address. After a private investigator confirmed the affair, I moved my plan into action. When I was financially and legally ready to leave my wife, I made sure to get in touch with several of the fire department officers that sat on the candidate review board. I provided them with the emails showing one of their candidates was using an illegal substance and had lied about it during the interview process. He was in the second round of interviews at the time and was slated to be part of the incoming class, as he had done very well, supposedly. Needless to say, he was rejected. I used my contacts in the EMS community to make sure he would never be accepted to a major fire department within a 200-mile radius. He and my wife took my dream of marriage from me, so I took something from them that had just a profound effect. He's currently working dead-end jobs, probably still wondering why he cannot get accepted to firefighter schools. Tell us more about the wife's punishment. That will have to be another thread for another time, and will likely require a few glasses of spirits. While I feel the consequences of her betrayal were justified, I'm not proud of my actions as they verge on cruel. A bigger man perhaps would have just walked away. Story 14. My stepmom was evil. I won't go into detail on all the stuff she put my sister and I through, except for one. She put two little girls on diets because we were fat. I tolerated her BS because my mom was out on the road working, and she desperately needed a place for us to stay, so she put us with my sister's father. One day, I snapped. My 12-year-old self had an evil idea. Once a week, my stepmom used this $100 conditioning treatment on her hair. She was 56 at the time and desperate to do anything to save her youth. I went to my mom's for the weekend and snatched a bottle of Nair. When I came back for the week, my plan went into fruition. I dumped out half of her fancy conditioner and filled the rest with Nair. I gave it a good shake and put it back in the cabinet. Then I waited. The same time every week, she'd put the conditioning treatment in and soak in the bath for about 30 minutes, even though the bottle of the stuff only called for about 15 minutes. She got out of the tub and took a shower. She stepped out. Almost all of her fancy permed hair was gone. She never knew it was me. So what happened? Did it grow out? Did she buy a wig? She shaved it off and wore a wig until it all grew back. It took about 10 months for it all to come in, but she still had a bit of a bald spot on the back of her head. Story 15. After my mother divorced my father, she got quite a bit out of it. Dad ended up in a one-room efficiency apartment in downtown Houston. The location wasn't bad. It was near the arts district of Houston, so weekend visits during the day were nice, but nights would get pretty loud. The apartments were cheap, so they were favored by the local illegal workers, with 2 or 4 staying in the same apartment. After a week of hard work, they would sometimes party. Sometimes they shot guns, and my dad would call the cops on them. Sometimes they'd get macho and show everyone how tough they were by punching holes in the hallway drywall. Dad liked this area, and he liked the cheap rent, and he went into a sort of passive-aggressive war with his neighbors. He boarded over his window with a couple of 3x4-inch plywood boards, with quilts over that. If it got really bad, he put a curtain of heavy quilts over the door. My sister and I didn't see that happen very often, but Dad couldn't stand the holes in the apartment walls. They took a long time for the apartment manager to repair, so Dad would find a board and fill it full of long nails so that the nails went all the way through the board and out the other side. The morning after someone punched a hole in the wall, Dad made a big production of putting this board of nails into the wall nail side out, and then covering it with a patch. His neighbors watched him do it. Dad told them openly that every time someone punched a hole in the wall, he would do this again. A board of nails and a patch. Every now and then, the apartment owner would repaint the wall, and the patches would disappear. Dad only had to put in 3 or 4 nail boards before the wall punching stopped. Story 16. In the 3rd grade, my lazy public school English teacher refused to correct my test score. The Scantron machine would sometimes mark answers wrong, even though you marked the right one. So I figured out you could fill in between the 2 lines at the bottom of the Scantron, which would cause it to grade every answer wrong. The mark is subtle enough that nobody will notice, so I did that for virtually every test I took through grade school and encouraged my classmates to do the same. With so many tests coming back with a grade of 0, my teacher would most of the time have to grade them all by hand. So you continued to troll all your grade school teachers because one English teacher refused to correct your score. That is evil. Story 17. Between college and law school, I lived in a 3-bedroom house with 2 sorority girls. As a guy, it was awesome. In December, I told them that I would be taking the LSAT a few weeks in advance and reminded them a few times. The night before the test, they decided to invite a bunch of friends over. A lot of alcohol was consumed and loud times were had. I just wanted some sleep and asked them several times to keep it down. By 4 a.m., I was furious. The party was winding down and they were all talking about having a sleepover in the living room. I heard several of the guys mention that they didn't need a blanket, so I walked out into the darkened hallway, turned the thermostat all the way down, pulled off the knob, threw the knob into the yard, and went to sleep. When I woke up a few hours later and walked out the door, several of the guys were huddled together in the living room. One of the guys asked me why it was so cold. I just laughed and went to take my test. How'd you do on the LSAT? I would be so livid if some dumb party kept me from my future. Well enough to get into the school that I wanted. I was tired, but I also felt great about freezing those jerks out. Story 18. When I was a small child, roughly 6 or 7, I somehow ingeniously concocted a plan to freak my babysitter out. She set me down for a nap. When she came to get me, I pretended not to wake up. I pretended not to wake up when she shook me. I pretended not to wake up when she called my dad. I pretended not to wake up when she called 911. I pretended not to wake up when she dumped me in a tub full of freezing water. I winked at my younger sister from the freezing tub when the babysitter ran from the room to talk more with 911. I pretended not to wake up when she carried me naked downstairs. Finally, I gave it up when I realized the living room was filled with EMTs, police officers, and firefighters. I'm certain this is from another comment on Reddit, but an excellent way to test this is to hold the person's hand up and drop it on their face. Only the most dedicated or actually unconscious kids slap themselves. This kid was stoic enough to keep up the pretense in a tub of freezing water. I think a little auto-slapification wouldn't present a problem. As a former babysitter, this story made me irrationally angry. Kids never fail to amaze me with how much they lack foresight and the ability to weigh consequences. Story 19. I lost my full-time schedule going from 35+ hours a week to 15 hours a week to another part-timer when the part-timer told my superiors that I was talking trash. She ended up taking up my responsibilities and getting a $4 pay raise to match her promotion. I never got this because they used the excuse pay raises are frozen until next year due to the economy. BS, which apparently can be voided under special circumstances. One of the things involved in that position was to take the previous training notebooks and update each section, put the original notebook together, and mass print them. This had to be done twice a year. We'd hand them out for the training dates, and the people would keep them. Apparently, this is super hard because every year people would take 2 weeks to make them, and they'd still be screwed up. But not to boast, I did them in 3 days and made 0 mistakes. I mentioned this notebook because before I put in my 2 weeks notice, I screwed up the original notebooks really badly. I mixed up pages and removed some. My boss had told me not to put headers and page numbers on the individual pages like I wanted to keep them organized, which helped out with making my evil scheme more evil. All I wanted to do was make it a little harder for that girl to update the notebooks. But I heard that during the training it was chaotic because they didn't notice until then that it had been messed up. That meant the girl didn't update the notebook, so she mass printed this useless notebook full of 300+ pages. She was fired immediately after that. Sad to say, no, they never called me back. You weren't a jerk. If she was good at her job, she would have noticed and organized it. And did you talk trash? I never talked trash inside of work, but what she told them I said wasn't true. My boss had gotten into a terrible accident. She said I was telling everyone it was her fault for being a crappy driver and on the phone. I don't know if she was a crappy driver or not, or if she was on the phone, but it didn't matter. Story 20. I have a good one from 7th grade. I had a class that was right after football practice. We were always in a rush to get there, so we didn't have time to put our take-home stuff in our lockers. Anyway, it was a huge classroom, and we always had to leave our bags to the side. Well, this guy, and I still remember his name, Sonny, always used my cologne while I was somewhere else in the classroom. It sounds like no big deal, but I told him to stop, and he was doing it just to bully me pretty much. Well, I had this great idea to pee in the bottle and just transfer the actual cologne to a different container. All I have to say is, I will never forget watching Sonny spray my pee all over himself. I also won't forget the look on his face when he realized that he had just doused himself in human urine. Story 21. We had a teacher in grade school that was severely germophobic. Well, we didn't particularly like her, so I devised a plan. She was constantly taking things away from us if we were playing with them in class, so I found a bouncy ball and rubbed it on the bottom of a urinal. I brought it into class in a piece of paper or something and started hitting it around on my desk with a pen. She comes over and grabs the ball. I almost lose it laughing, but play it cool. Well, another thing that she did was pick up notes that people passed in class and read them. Well, I wrote a note to someone and blatantly passed it in front of her. She picked it up and read, "The ball you just took from me was in the urinal." She left the room immediately. As a germaphobe, I laughed my butt off at this. Then, washed your hands. Story 22. The kids in my neighborhood have this annoying tendency to walk out in front of your car and immediately slow down. They'll laugh at you and basically just dare you to hit them. After weeks of annoyance, I decided to find a way to teach them a lesson, so I started speeding up whenever they did it, and held my hands up so they could see I wasn't holding the steering wheel. Their expressions were priceless as they scrambled to get out of the way. I think I missed one kid by a foot or so. This happened in my neighborhood until the guy next door bashed a kid with his door at 30 miles per hour. That'll teach him to delay cars by several seconds. Well, you'd have to be evil, dumb, or indifferent to do this kind of thing. I don't think the reward outweighs the risk, but I guess that's why we call it an act of evil genius. Story 23. I've got one that was a semi-evil plan that snowballed into an extremely evil and dangerous string of events that almost got my ex-best friend killed. Sorry for the wall of text, but I wanted to get this out. I was 16 at the time and had a friend who I had grown up with. We had always been very close friends, but as we got older, he began to get involved in some heavy drugs. After a while, he began to slowly transform into a scumbag Steve, selling drugs here and there, dropping out of school, etc. One day, a neighbor of his agrees to buy some alcohol for a party that night. I'm really excited and want to impress this girl from school, so we both chip in $50 for one of those giant bottles of Grey Goose. The neighbor delivers and drops it off at my friend's house. We have the bottle sitting on the coffee table while him, his little brother, and myself are playing video games. I get up to go to the bathroom, and when I return, the vodka is gone. I laugh and say, "Good one. Where's the booze?" And they both avoided eye contact with me and said they didn't know. I told them, this is royally messed up. The booze didn't just get up and walk away. Where's the vodka? Again, I met with, I don't know, silence and staring at the TV screen to avoid eye contact with me. At this point, I'm livid, seething with anger so bad I know where they get the phrase blood boiling. However, I keep my composure and wait around about 15 minutes asking over and over to either cut the unfunny joke or fess up. Finally, I let them both know that if they disrespect me that much, I can take a hint and I leave knowing how I'll get my money back. I decided I would look into everything I could about making counterfeit money. Being 16 and stupid, I used our relatively crappy printer to print 3 crappy looking $20 bills. I wait about a week for things to blow over a bit and ask my scumbag Steve friend if I could get $60 worth of some of the stuff that he sells. Things go smoothly and he doesn't question a thing because he was constantly drunk, high, and knew nothing of computers. I left. I felt like I'd put the universe back in balance by getting even, and considered the friendship done. Well, a few weeks later, I learned through a mutual friend that my ex-friend had given his dealer 2 of the fake 20s. The dealer proceeded to go to a convenience store afterwards, and when he tried to use the fake 20, the clerk spotted it immediately and called the cops. The cops arrived, and even though the dealer vehemently denied knowing it was fake, they still searched his car for more fake currency and ended up finding a bunch of separate little baggies of drugs. Needless to say, the dealer got into major trouble and he knew exactly who had given him the fake money. However, my ex-friend had no idea he ever had fake money or who had given him the fakes. A few nights after the guy gets busted, 2 masked men break into my ex-friend's house and holds his family at gunpoint, while the other beats my ex-friend nearly to death with a baseball bat. They also looted pretty much anything of value that they could carry. This is gonna sound brutal, but that's what he gets for being involved with drug dealers and screwing over his friends. I don't believe that there is some magical butt kicker making douches regret their ways, but darn it all if this isn't a good argument for his existence. Thanks for watching until the end. If you have a similar story that you would like to share, please leave it in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, please leave us a like and subscribe. And for more videos like this one right now, please stop by our channel. Thanks again, and see you next time.